Hello everyone, and welcome to my little tutorial series of learning how to program in C++. My name is Joe, or Hoodie Mage is my YouTube channel name, and I decided recently to start doing some programming tutorials for people that might be interested in learning C++, either coming from another language or never having programmed before. Mainly because I wanted a reason to kind of get back into the hang of programming C++ myself, because I'm a little rusty and it's been a few years since I've really spent a lot of time with it. But again, also just wanted to sorry, I just realized you can see me messing around with it. I do this when I'm on the desktop and don't have anything else I'm doing. I just make selections. Anyway, and I thought I would just help some other people. I can't stop doing it. Help some other people learn how to program as well. So, again, this is kind of aimed at beginners, people who have not programmed at all. However, I do expect you to have a pretty decent knowledge of working with computers, operating systems, downloading, installing programs, all that fun stuff, file management, because I'm not going to explain everything step by step related to that, but I'm sure if you found this video, you're already pretty comfortable with how to create a folder, how to install a program, etc. So basically, this series is going to be an introduction on C++. I am actually going to be, kind of as my reference material, going to be using a book called C++ Primer Plus. I'm using the 5th edition, authored by Stephen Prata, Prata, and this particular version of the book was published in 2005, so it is a little bit older, 10 years now. Wow. It is 10 years old, but there's only one new version since then, and pretty much all of the information in the book is relevant. If you're interested in following along, I am going to be using exercises and examples from this book as kind of a guideline. I'm not going to be going over all of the content in the book. I'm not going to read all of it because it's not, I didn't write it. But if you're interested, I definitely recommend picking it up. You can get this book for super cheap, and it is, in my opinion, the best book to have when it comes to learning how to program C++. I'll go ahead and pull it up on Amazon here real quick. And actually, I was just looking at it, so here is the version I have. You can see this is the older version, so it's only available used on Amazon for about $25. Is a phenomenal price. There's a new version, I think this is it, version 6, yeah, for $42.69. So definitely worth picking up. The second thing that I wanted to mention is what kind of compiler I'm going to be using. I'm going to be using Microsoft Visual Studio 2013, and if you're following this video, I recommend you do as well. There's definitely some other compilers out there. You can even just use a text editor and then pass it through a compiler. You don't actually have to write all your code in a compiler, but I recommend it for starting out to use Visual Studio 2013, and one of the main reasons for that is if you go to visualstudio.com, very recently they made the community version free for anyone, any small team, which means 1 to a few people. And if you're one person, then that means you. So you can just go here, download, it'll save the executable. It'll take a while because there's a lot of stuff it has to download and install, but once that is done, you'll be left with a nice cute little icon right on your desktop that says Visual Studio 2013. Now, what is C++? C++ is an object-oriented programming language. It originated in the 1990s and is still extremely popular. As you can see from some of my icons on here, I'm a gamer, and actually I learned C++ through DeVry, where I was going to study for game programming and simulation programming. And if you're programming games, especially for the PC and a lot of the consoles, you're going to be using a C-based language. A lot of developers use C++ because, unlike languages like Java, it just gives you a lot more flexibility with kind of managing your memory usage and a lot of other things. It's definitely a more difficult language because it's a lot more strict with its rules and syntax, but because of that, it is a much more efficient language and a much more powerful language, but it is harder. But I do recommend learning C++ first over a language like Java, specifically for that fact, just to kind of get you in those habits of good, efficient programming strategies. So, with that, basically C++ originated from the language C, and it for the most part is C with an object-oriented kind of methodology, where C is not an object-oriented programming language. C++ is. What is object-oriented programming? Don't worry about it, just know for now. I will explain it later. The main thing to note about it is a very powerful version or type of programming, and it's powerful. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start up Visual Studio 2013 Community Edition, as you can see here. When you do that, you're going to get a start page. You can leave that open if you want. I recommend closing it out. You're also going to get your kind of basic layout here, which I recommend for now just leaving at the standard. We're going to have an output down here. Also debugging, as you can see, error list down there, which is going to be handy, and our Solution Explorer over on the right side. So, what we're going to need to do, I'm going to go over the one basic program today. I'm going to try to keep these videos pretty succinct. I don't want to make super long videos because getting through too much content in one video can be difficult, both for me and the viewer. And with shorter, smaller videos, if you do want to take in more content in one day, you definitely can. Just watch multiple videos in a row. And this first section is going to be just basically getting our feet on the ground with C++, Visual Studio, and kind of what the basics of a C++ program are. So, without further ado, we're going to create our first C++ program. To do that, you're going to need to create a new, you can go to File, New, and we're going to need to create a new project. Now, this isn't going to be what you have selected by default. You're probably going to have Visual Basic expanded, and it's going to have one of these selected. You can go ahead and just collapse Visual Basic by hitting the little arrow next to it, and we're going to click on Visual C++ here. Now you can see Visual Studio is a pretty awesome compiler because it supports a lot of different languages. So we have Visual Basic, Visual C Sharp, Visual F Sharp, which honestly I don't even know what F Sharp is. I've never heard of it. You got SQL Server, JavaScript, Python, TypeScript, and some other types of projects. So we're going to click on Visual C++ here because we're learning C++, and the majority, if not all, of the programs that we make, or applications that we make, are going to be a Win32 console application, which basically means that we're using the console or the command prompt for our input and output for the most part. It's just an easy way to learn, because if you want to use a window and have graphics and everything display, you might want to go learn Java, because it's going to take quite a bit to get to that point in C++. Even just to get a window to display using something like DirectX can take 100 or more lines of code. Real fun. But we will be able to do a lot of cool stuff with the console application, so I don't want to scare you away. There's a lot of awesome stuff you can do with this. It's just not going to be making games right off the bat. So, we have console application selected. We're going to need to browse to where we want to save it, what folder or directory we want to save it in. Myself, I have just created in my documents a folder called C++, and so we're going to select that. And for the solution, you can kind of call it whatever you'd like. For this one, I'm going to call it example 2.1 because I'm actually using the book as a reference. This is the second chapter, and it is the first example in that chapter. So we're going to hit OK there, and then you're going to get this little application wizard here, and we're going to want to hit next. You don't want to hit finish on this previous screen quite yet, because there's one thing we want to select in here. Again, you want to make sure it's a console application. Since we selected console application, that should be selected. And then you are going to want to click on this empty project option here. That's important because otherwise it's going to throw some stuff in there that we don't want. Actually, just out of curiosity, let me do it without an empty project. Yeah, so we got some garbage in here that I definitely do not want. So, real quick, gonna go ahead and it would help if I closed this solution. Oops, close solution. I'm gonna delete this, and we're gonna go ahead and create that again. New project, Win32 console. Luckily, it remembers your last selection, so we're not going to have to go through that entire process every time. And again, example 2.1. Okay. Next, and this time I am going to select empty project and hit finish. And there we go. Right off the bat, it doesn't really look like anything's different. However, if you look over here on the Solution Explorer, we do have some items thrown in here. So, first thing we're going to do is we need to add what is called a source file. And the source file is going to contain the code that the program compiles and executes. So, and actually, before I create that, let me talk a little bit about compilers. Basically, what a compiler does is it takes your code that is ASCII text, or text that you input from your keyboard, and it is going to compile it and translate it into machine code, ones and zeros, so that the computer can understand it, and then it's going to execute that code for you and actually run the application. That's a quick, dirty explanation of that. So, to add a source file, what you're going to want to do is right-click on source files, go to Add, and select New Item. And we get another lovely menu here. This can definitely, all these menus can be overwhelming if you're just starting to learn this, but we're basically going to be choosing the same options every time. So, it's going to have this selected by default. If not, go ahead and just click on Visual C++ and then click on this C++ file. It's going to have the extension .cpp, which stands for C++, and we're going to name it. Doesn't really matter if you cut off the .cpp or not, but I'm not going to. We are going to call this one MyFirst, because it's going to be our first C++ application. Going to go to Add, and now we have a lovely white window. So, what are we going to do in this window? Well, we're going to add some code, and with that code, we're going to be able to do cool things. So, real quick, again, I'm going to be using an example from the book. I'm going to type it out real quick, and then I will explain everything afterwards. So, we got MyFirst C++, and it's going to displays a message, and we're going to include IOStream into main, and we're going to use the namespace std, and we're going to see out some stuff. Come up and C++ me sometime, haha. And L, gonna say some more stuff. You won't regret it. And actually, we're gonna get another line in there and return 0. Okay, dokie. Now, I'm gonna go through and kind of explain everything here. There's a lot to explain here with just these several lines of code, so I'm not going to go super in depth. This first episode is going to be a little bit lengthier than future episodes. Some will be longer than others, obviously. So, what we have here is our first program, and before I attempt to run it, I'm going to explain what we have going on here. So, let's start with this line here, int main, and then we have some parentheses. Now, basically what this is what's called a function, and we're going to go to into functions in a lot more detail later on in a later section, but it is necessary to explain what this main business is, so I'm going to explain it very briefly here. If you don't understand completely, don't worry, you don't have to go back and rewatch stuff, because again, it will all be explained. Just know that this is what you have to do to get a C++ program functioning. And it is really the only thing required to have a C++ program is this int main function. Now, this int main function consists of the word int, the word main, some parentheses, and these opening and closing little squirrely braces, brackets, if you will. And so basically this is a function, and what a function consists of is you're going to have like a data type, which is what this int is. And for the sake of keeping things clean, you're going to have your data type. You're going to have the word main or function name, since we're talking about functions and not main in particular. Then in your parentheses, you're going to have some variables, and again, opening and closing braces, and then you're going to have some statements. So, basically, easiest thing to explain, you have a function name. This is the name of your function. If you ever need to use the function, then you will call it by its name. This one would be called function name. The second thing to point out is the data type. So up here, for example, the name of the function is main, and the data type that it is going to return is an int, which stands for integer. So your nice, cute little numbers, 0 through a lot. And basically what this tells the computer is what type of variable or data type this function is going to return. Again, if this is confusing at all, don't worry, it'll be explained as we go along. And so every function must return something, even if it is returning nothing. So, well, that's not necessarily true, but functions can return nothing, is what I'm trying to say. We'll talk about it later. Anyway, since this is an integer, it's going to return an integer, so right down here at the bottom we see that it returns 0, which, lucky for us, is an integer. The next part is you're going to have some variables in here. We're not going to really talk about this right now. All you need to know is, as you can see up above here, in these parentheses, there's nothing. So a function does not have to have anything in the parentheses, but it can, and we'll talk about that later. Next important part is the brackets. These opening and closing brackets basically serve to tell our program, hey, this is where the function starts, this is where the function ends. Anything in between belongs to that function. So, for example, you're going to have a bunch of statements in here. So everything inside these braces are going to be the statements, and that's going to be part of the function. So, well, that's enough about functions for now. Again, we're going to go into way more detail about functions later on, but for now, that is good enough to serve our means of basic understanding, however confusing it may be for now. But basically, you have to have this main function, and everything in your program is going to be contained within this function. So when this program is compiled, basically with the rules of C++, the compiler is going to look for this function called main. If it doesn't exist, it's not going to know what to do, and it's going to be bad times. Okay, I said everything is going to be contained within the main function. That is not necessarily true, and again, that will be explained later, but you have to have a main. And whatever you put inside the main function is what is going to constitute your program. Okay. Oh, next item. One quick little thing about functions. This line here is called the function header, and this is the function body. So this kind of contains the information about the function. This contains the code or the body that its body. So if you've ever done HTML, it's very similar. How you have your head information, which contains a lot of like the kind of metadata. Like this would be kind of the metadata of the function, and then you actually have your content in your body tags for HTML. So if you know HTML, that's a good way to understand it. Also, as you see, you can click on the little minus plus option next to a function, and it'll collapse it nice and neat for you, which can be extremely helpful when later on when you have big long codes that you're trying to sort through. Okay, so that's functions briefly, and the main function in particular. Next up here, and actually let me add some comments here. I'm going to explain what comments are in a second as well. So we got that, which I'm going to talk about next. We have a function header, which I just talked about. And then these little curly brace here, we have our start of function body. And then down here, we had our end of function body. Cool, cool, and cool. Alright, so comments are basically text in your code that is for you and you only, or someone else who's working on the code or looking at your code or whatever. Basically, a comment is something that the computer does not process. It ignores it completely when executing and compiling the code. It's just basically to help kind of organize and keep track of things in your code. So like over here we have, as we're kind of explaining what each line does for the benefit of ourselves, or if to anyone else was to look at our code. If you don't use comments in your code, you're not a good programmer, and there's very few people that will disagree with that. So always comment in your code to help yourself and to help anyone else that may be working on the same program. So, what defines a comment, or what tells the computer, hey, I'm a comment, I'm not some code, ignore me, and do not compile or execute me? Well, it is these two little forward slashes here. Forward slash denotes a comment. As you can notice, it takes effect for one line, as once we have our carriage return here, this code is not green, so it is going to be actually processed. So anything that's green is going to be just a comment that the computer ignores. There is another way to comment things if you do want to make comments on more than one line without entering the two forward slashes each time, and that syntax is forward slash asterisk. And with Visual Studio, it's actually going to automatically finish it off for me, but as you can see, to end your comment, it's going to be, the reverse is going to be asterisk forward slash. So with this, we can do a bunch of carriage returns, type some stuff, and it is still considered a comment. This is a comment. And we can go another line down. This is also a comment. And we can leave that in there. It's not going to affect anything because the computer is just going to ignore it. So that's a quick thing on comments. Very useful, even though they don't actually do anything in a program. Another thing I wanted to mention real quick is I have spaces between the forward slashes here. You don't have to. You can push it up right next against the forward slashes, and it'll still work. I am just doing that to make it a little bit easier to read. Okay, next thing we're talking about is kind of boring stuff, but important. This include IO stream. I'm not going to go super into what this is right now. Again, we'll cover all of that later, but basically what this is doing is it's going and grabbing another data from another file, code, extra code that I can use, and it is bringing it into this program so that I don't have to enter in all the code in this program. I can just say, hey, I need to use the code from IOStream, and this pound include allows me to do so. This is the proper syntax. We're going to be using this in all of our beginning programs. Just know that you need it, and it's basically allowing us to use some commands and objects and functions from someone else's code. That allows us to do cool things, because without including this, we really wouldn't be able to do that much, other than the very, very, very basic tasks of C++. So, down here, we have using namespace std. Let me go ahead and add a comment about this line real quick. Make definitions visible. So what this is doing is it is, again, we're going to talk about this later. It's using the namespace, which we'll talk about later, and the namespace that it's using is std. Basically, these 3 lines here are using a command, or it's actually an object, we'll just call it a command for now, called cout. And if I didn't use this using namespace std, what I would have to do is std semicolon semicolon cout, and I would have to do that anytime I wanted to use any command or object in the std namespace. Instead, I'm just telling it, hey, use this namespace, so I don't have to type that all the time. It's not a great explanation of namespaces or header files, but it's gonna work for now. It's a pretty boring topic, so in my opinion, I mean, it's interesting, but when you're first starting out, it's really boring. So I'm gonna ignore that for now. Now, the next line here, what do we have? We have a message. And basically what this is going to do is print out on our console, come and C++ me sometime. So, cute little play on words there, isn't it? So how is this displaying to the console? Well, we're using the cout command, and what cout does is it outputs something to the console. You can get that from the word out, and then C, since we're programming in C. So it is outputting this to the console. So when we run this program, this is going to pop up on the console screen. Now these are basically, these are required. Everything here is required. But these are telling it that this information over here, which is some text, is going to be passed to this command. So if we flip that around, we would read it as this command is passing something over here over to this side of the command, or the statement. Yeah, we'll see a use of that later, but just for now, know that this text here, come and C++ me sometime, is being passed to this command, and this command is basically outputting whatever it is given to the command prompt. So we're passing this over to this command, and this command is then passing it to the console window or the command prompt. Over here, we notice that there are some double quotations around this text. That is necessary as well whenever you're using text like this that isn't like a single character or a number or something like that. You're going to need to put double quotations around it because it's something called a string. We're going to get into what strings are later, but it's basically a bunch of characters put together. And then at the end of every command, we're going to need this little guy, semicolon. It functions kind of like a period. If you were comparing this to a sentence, it would be the period, and basically all it does is tell the compiler that, hey, this line of code is complete, go ahead and move on to the next one, where if we got rid of that, it would try to basically process this line and this line all as one command. We'd get an error because the syntax for that would be incorrect, and as we can see, it actually gives a little red squiggly underline under it. If I hover over it, it tells us that there's going to be an error, and that it expected a semicolon, and it expected a semicolon right up here where I took it from. So haha. Okay, that's that line. Pretty plain and simple there for the most part. And again, we're going to go on all of this stuff. We're going to go into much more detail. This is kind of just an example to write a program, a very simple one, and give some quick explanations of what everything's doing. We're going to visit everything discussed in this video in much more detail in later videos. So just keep that in mind. If you're confused, don't worry about it. We're going to talk a lot more about all this stuff. Okay, so on this line here, we're going to start a new line. So basically what this is doing is, again, passing something to this cout command, and therefore passing it to the command line. And you know what? This might actually be easier. Let me go ahead and show you what this looks like. I just realized that I've been talking about all this stuff, but with passing things to the command prompt or the console, but that might not make a lot of sense if you haven't worked with a command prompt or console before. So let me actually just run it real quick, and you can do that. You can run any of your programs by clicking this big play button, local Windows debugger. It's gonna ask if I want to build it, and I'm gonna hit yes. Oh, sorry. And after it builds it, it is going to run the program and debug it at the same time. So if we had any errors, they would be displayed right now. Luckily, my programming is flawless in this particular situation, and everything works fine. So we can see the result of this program over here. So this is the console. This is it's not actually a command prompt. It is just a console. I might call it a command prompt sometimes. No big deal. Just know that I'm talking about this console here, not the actual Windows command prompt where I can do neat things. It's another place where I can do neat things. Even neater things, actually. So, yeah. So when I say that on this line here, that this text is being passed to this command, which is being passed to the console, essentially this text is being passed to the console. Therefore, it is showing up on the console here. Come and C++ me sometime. Okay, very good. Now we have the console and a little more context. Back to our code. What this line does is, basically with the cout command, it's going to enter in this text, and then it's going to leave the cursor right afterwards. So, for example, excuse me, if we just ran this line, it would say come up and C++ me some time, and the cursor would actually be still right after the period. It wouldn't automatically enter a new line, so it wouldn't come down here automatically. It just leaves the cursor wherever you tell it to be left. So if I ended up telling it to print another line of text after this, say I wanted it to print the word bubble, and I just said cout less than, and then bubble in quotations, semicolon, it would just print bubble. Wouldn't be on a new line or anything. So that's how cout works. You have to tell it when you want to make a new line. So that's what this line is. You can see starting a new line, and basically we're passing, see if it gives. So you can see here actually this big long thing where it's getting this command from, but basically this command tells our cout command to enter a new line. There is another way to accomplish this, and that's simply all this does, is it enters a new line. It doesn't do anything else. So end L, it's not a 1, it's an L. So end L, standing for end line. Then down here we have another display, so we're passing you won't regret it over to cout, which is putting it on the console for us. And then right after that, we're passing it end L. So you can actually string together multiple items, so you can pass it multiple things on one line instead of entering this end L on a separate line. We can just put it on the same line and pass that through. Now we can't, for example, just say end L here, because it would just print this out on the console, because it's within quotation marks, so it just sees it as part of that string that it's going to print on the screen. And we also have to have this operator here, the two less than symbols, to tell it that it's taking in something else. We could put another string over here, that would be fine. You won't regret it, I promise. And if we run that, oops, it's going to add the text that I added there. Going to get rid of that, put our end L back in there. You could also even pass like a number, I think. Let me make sure, yeah. So we passed it a number. As you can see, it's right next to the exclamation point because we didn't put a space after there. And like I said, that cursor is going to be left exactly where you tell it to be left. So this is going to put in a new line after our you won't regret it text, which isn't really necessary here because it's the end of our program and we're not doing anything else after it, but it's a good habit to do that, just to keep things clean. Now there's one other way to make a carriage return or start a new line that we haven't talked about yet. Actually, real quick, I'll add a comment in here. And that is a little more compact of a way. So we're going to get rid of this. Now we just have it outputting you won't regret this. There's no extra line being added at the end. And what we can do is we can give this command inside of the string that we're passing to cout. And this is the new line command or new line character. And basically, when the compiler comes across a backslash, and note that this is a backslash, it is very specific that you must use a backslash and not a forward slash because they're different. They're different characters. They have different ASCII codes. And when the computer comes along and it's doing its thing, it's compiling stuff and executing it, it's gonna hit this backspace and it's gonna be like, oh, something is different here. I need to pay special attention. Basically, this backslash tells the computer, hey, this thing that's coming after the backslash is actually not just a character, it's some command. So in this case, when you put an N after a backslash, it tells the computer, please give me a new line, hence new line character. If we did /N, it's actually just going to print this out. It's going to print out /N. If we do \n and run that, then you can see it prints out you won't regret it, and then there's a new line down here. The cursor's down here now instead of up here. Very good. So when it runs into something like this, one of these characters denoted by a backslash, it's actually not going to print whatever is after it on the screen. Or it's not going to print the backslash and then the N. There's some cases where it will print something on the screen, but it's not going to print this backslash. It'll never print the first backslash. For example, you may ask, well, if backslash denotes some special type of character, what if I want to use a backslash and display that to the console? How do I do that? Well, you do it like this. You just do 2 backslashes, and it tells, computer comes along, it sees, oh, a backslash, what's after it? Oh, another backslash? Okay, I'm just going to print a backslash then. See, I typed in 2 backslashes, but it is only printing 1 because it's telling the computer, hey, look at this, a backslash. Instead of, hey, look at this, a new line. Please give me that. So, we're going to leave that in our code for now, actually. Man, this video is taking a lot longer than I was expecting. The next one's going to be a lot shorter. So, I apologize. Thanks for hanging in. And also in the next video, I'm going to change my text, my font size, because I realize it might be a little small for mobile devices especially. Okay, so next, actually, I'm going to comment this out real quick. Because this is actually, without this is how the book has it. So I want to, this is something I added in myself, and I'll explain it momentarily. But first, we're going to move on to this line. And this is terminate main. So this is terminating main, our main function. So like I mentioned before, every function has to return something, even if it's returning nothing, which is an explanation of that. Void. Void is nothing. Again, we'll talk about that a lot more later. But since we made our function an integer, we need to return an integer. And once something is returned from a function, that function is done. You cannot do anything else after it. And if I put any other text after here, whoa, did not mean to do that. If I put any text after return 0, it wouldn't run, because this function's done. So return is basically like, hey, end this function. And then it's going to return some sort of value, whether it be a number or a character or a string. All of those we'll talk about later. Or, like I said, it can return nothing. We're returning 0, and that is helpful. Why is that helpful? Well, you could return nothing in the main function, and basically it would do what that sounds like. It wouldn't return anything. This is returning a character. And you can see down here in our output that this very last line here may be hard to read, so I'll just read it. The program 13244 console application 1.exe has exited with code 0, which basically is just a way to tell us, hey, we got through everything, and everything worked properly, because at the end of the day we got a 0 back, and that is good. Where if we had gotten a 1 or a 2 or a 1, 2, 3, 4, we would know, okay, something really weird went wrong with our program, and it probably just threw in some garbage from some memory location for our return value. So this kind of just tells us that if we get a return code of 0, our program worked properly. Nothing really went wrong. I mean, things can go wrong, but it got to the end of it, and everything was okay. So that's why we use an integer, and you can make this whatever number. I can make it 8. That'd be fine. It'd still be the same. And then if we would exit here, we would exit here with code 8. And since I told it to return code 8, hey, I know that everything worked fine because it told it to returned what I told it to. So again, return tells the function to be done. In this example, it's our entire program is done, since that's what's within main. We'll talk about return a lot more when we talk about functions in detail. But another thing is, you can notice when I commented out this getCar function here, when I debug this now, if you watch really closely, you could see the console pop up briefly, but it just went away. And that's because it went through all this code, it displayed everything, we didn't see it because it went so fast, and then it returned 0 and it terminated the function, it quit. And so it didn't stay on screen long enough for us to see anything. So that's what this function is about right here. So we'll make a little comment, wait for input. More specifically, enter key. What this function does is it basically does a lot what it sounds like. It gets a character. So it's getting some input. We're going to talk about input and output and all that fun jazz later on. But it basically just allows us to see what happens on our console without just immediately exiting once it hits that return. So it's getting a character. It's waiting to get a character from us. It's waiting to get a character from the console. And what a character is a single letter or number or symbol, or it can be, nothing. Basically, what this function does is it just waits for us to hit the enter key before it does anything. So I mean, I can hit other keys and it's just going to type random stuff into the console, but it's not actually going to quit the application or move on through the code until I hit enter. So I hit enter, it's done. Again, we exit with code 0, so we never know everything worked properly. Yeah, so basically anytime you put this get character or get car function, which again, since it's a function, well, we haven't talked about that. Don't worry about the why we need these parentheses or where this is coming from. Just know that we're going to use this to basically wait for an enter key press whenever we need to. So whenever you need to wait for an enter key press, it doesn't have to be right at the end of this. Like we can put it, go to the end of here, we can put a get car command here. Again, remember you have to end everything with a semicolon. We can run this, and as you can see, it's coming down and it's going through this code. So it's outputting coming C++ me sometime. Okay, that worked. It should output a line here. Yep, looks like the cursor moved from right there to down there. That's good. And then it hits the get car function, and it's like, oh, I'm waiting for a character. For our function, for our needs, it's waiting for an enter key press. If I press the enter key, it's going to go ahead and it's going to move on to the next line of code. So now we're moving on to "you won't regret it!" exclamation point, and our little new line characters. So we're getting a line return here, and then again it's calling get car, and it's waiting for the user to hit the enter key. We're going to hit it again. It's going to go down, return, tell the program, hey, we're done, return a value of 0. So we can see it down here and know, hey, everything worked. Whew. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this get car that I added there. Leave the one at the end because this is more or less how the function looks in the book if you're following along with the book. Oh boy. We're almost done. Almost done with the first video here. There's 2 more things I wanted to talk about. One is syntax, and basically what syntax is like the language or how you have to enter things in for the computer to understand it. So the one thing that I wanted to talk about particularly is kind of the formatting and white space of the program. So C++ doesn't really care about white space. It does and it doesn't. Basically, I can hit the enter key or the space bar here a ton of times, and when I run this program, it is still going to do the exact same thing. So it doesn't care if I put a bunch of spaces in here, if I, hit a bunch of carriage returns and put it down here on another line. It doesn't care. It's still going to run exactly the same, because each line, each command is being ended with this semicolon. It uses that to kind of say, okay, now we're done with this code, instead of saying, oh, there's a space here, we're done with the code. Nope, doesn't care about spaces, doesn't care about enter keys. It just cares about this semicolon here. So you can use a lot of white space. We could put a bunch of white space here, we could put a bunch of white space here, we could put a bunch of white space here, we could put some here, put some here, put some here. Hit the enter key here. It's gonna look ugly, but it won't care. Ow. Alright, back to normal. Now, there are some situations where white space does matter. Where does it matter? Well, it matters if you enter a space in between a command, like a word. Now this is UZNG instead of using, so you can't just put it anywhere. It has to be like extra white space where there's already white space. So it can't be, in the middle of namespace. It can't be in the middle of std, because these are all commands or variables that the computer is using. You can't put it in here, because then it's no longer cout. It's co space ut, which is nothing. Also, it matters when you're in a string or quotation marks, because it is a string. So if I put an extra space in here, it's not going to affect, it's not going to cause any errors, but it is going to add an extra space when we print it out to the console. Can't put it in the middle of endl, because that's a command. Can't put it in the middle of \n, because then it's going to read this as \space instead of \n. So that's, a kind of sort of command. So you just don't want to put it in the middle of commands. If there's any other specific white space issues, I'll let you know. Again, you can put it in front of parentheses and inside parentheses, and it won't do anything. So we couldn't put it there, Okay, that's enough about white space and all that. Now, there's some formatting standards, coding styles that we're going to use, and I'm going to follow, and the book recommends, and they will make your programming life much, much easier, because it's going to make your code a lot easier, and it's going to make it a lot easier to find bugs if you have any of them, and locate errors and all that. Now, the first kind of outline or rule that we're going to use, and all of these rules, you don't have to follow them for the program to work. It is purely just recommended for ease of readability and ease of programming and debugging. The first rule is you should use one statement per line. So I could, and again, it doesn't care about white space, so I could have a bunch of white space. I have one command on this line, and then I have a bunch of white space, and then I'm going to put another command on the same line. The computer doesn't care. There's a semicolon here, so it knows this command's done. There's a semicolon here, so it knows this command's done. We know it doesn't care about white space, so if we run this, hey, look, it works fine. But it looks bad, and it's difficult to find issues in this, because if we had an error, if we got rid of this semicolon, we run, we got a build error. We got an error. It's going to ask if we want to continue and run the last successful build. No, I don't want to do that. And look down here. We have an error. We have a syntax error, missing a semicolon before identifier cout. It's going to tell us what line this is on. It's on line 8. Oh, I'm not showing lines here. Basically, each line of code is going to be numbered. I'll turn that on for the next video, but just pretend there's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This is line 8. So we can say, oh, okay, it's on line 8. Well, if I have two commands on the same line, it makes it a little tricky. Am I missing a semicolon in this command, or am I missing a semicolon in this command? I don't know, because I broke the rules, and luckily I know because I took it out, and I put two commands on the same line. So don't do that. One command per line keeps it nice and clean. That's how you should do it. Don't have to, but I won't help you if you don't. Second, opening and closing braces. There must be an opening and a closing brace for each function. Also, they should be on their own line. Now, this is one that I don't follow all the time in my personal programming projects and such, but it's really, in my opinion, the best way to do it. So as you can see here, we have an opening brace and a closing brace for the main function. So we've fulfilled that half of the rule. The other half is each one should be on their own line. So yeah, we have this one has its own line, this one has its own line. Now, we could... Oh, all these comments are messing with me, because I can't easily modify things here. Now, we could instead have the opening brace up here on the same line. We could even have a bunch of spaces in front of it. Wouldn't matter. Oops. Trying to prove a point. So we could even have it up here. We run. Everything works fine. But again, just for readability's sake, and also if you're messing around with this, be careful. If you click it right in the middle, oh, never mind. Huh. Ignore that. I thought it would delete both of them because it highlighted both of them, but it won't. Anyways, just for easy readability, we're gonna put these on their own lines. But yeah, kind of cool thing, if you click on an opening curly brace, it'll also highlight the closing one. This one is highlighting in gray, so you probably can't see it on YouTube, but it is highlighting both of them. Yeah, same if you click the closing one, it'll highlight the opening one. Very helpful. So, for example, we have int function funct, and then we have our opening and closing things. We could have this right next to it, and we could have some code. Cout. This is bad. And you can see it's not color coding any of this because it's outside of my main function, so it doesn't know that the cout is in the std namespace. Now it's working. Sorry, that was more confusing than it needed to be. So we could even that's kind of cool. So even it wants you to have it on a new line so bad that if I enter a semicolon to tell them that this statement is done, it's going to put it on a new line for me in Visual Studio. So yeah, just separate them. It's good. The next rule is that you want to indent anything in braces. So, as you can see, we have a brace. Everything followed by that brace should be indented one time. Then once we get outside of that brace, we can unindent stuff again, and that's fine. But anything in a brace should be indented, and that just, again, helps for readability, because if we, oh goodness, if we do this, it just makes it, and it's not that bad in this example, but once you get braces, you know, within braces, within braces, within braces, it can get really confusing. It can get really confusing to tell, does this stuff belong to this function, or does it belong to this function, or does it belong to this if-else statement? I don't know, because I didn't indent. So just indent, and you'll see more examples of this in the future. The last rule is no white space around parentheses associated with a function name. So, like I said, you can put white space here before the parentheses, but for, again, easy readability, easy debugging, you don't want to do that. Just no space, that way you know, hey, these parentheses are related to this function. That space can make it kind of hard to associate it with that function. Add an extra N there. So just, yeah, this is probably the most minor one out of all of the rules. If you don't follow this one, I don't care. I do care if you don't follow the other ones, though. Well, the braces one on their own line, not so much, but as you can see, Visual Basic really, really wants you to have them on their own line. So those are the 4 rules that we're going to follow for our styling and formatting, and how we're going to lay everything out on the page to make it more easily readable. Alright, so we're finally done. This is a very long episode. I thought this was going to be much, much shorter than it was. But we got a lot of content covered. Hopefully you enjoyed. In the next one, we're basically just going to go over, one second here, just one more example. It's going to be a lot shorter. We're going to kind of break down some more information about some variables and data types, not going into them very deeply. We have a whole section devoted to data types and variables that we'll talk about, but just a quick, brief understanding of variables and declaring them and how great they are, all that stuff. So that's what we're going to be looking at the next video. In this video, we kind of had a quick / long introduction to C++, what it is, who this series is for, you know, where C++ came from, how to create a C++ program in Visual Studio 2013. You know, the book I'm using, again, is C++ Primer Plus, and I recommend that you pick it up if you have any interest in C++ programming, which you do because you're watching this video. Maybe you just like my voice, though. And we created our first function. We went over, we created our first program. We went over functions. We went over header files, kind of, namespaces, kind of. We went over the cout function, end line command, the end line character, the get character command, and what return does. We went over comments, did a bunch of cool stuff. And with all this stuff, we're going to be able to complete even more complex and interesting programs as we go along. So stick with me. Yeah, again, thanks for watching. I've been Joe, or Hoodie Mage, as I am known here on YouTube. And if you enjoyed the video, I do definitely appreciate the good old like, comment, or a subscription. A free subscription. If you notice me saying anything wrong in the video or have any feedback, feel free to tell me either through a message or in the comments. I will be reading them. One last thing. One more thing. One last thing. I probably will have a website for the series at some point, as I've been messing around with HTML and CSS a little bit recently, so I'll let you know if that happens. But anyway, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.